You wake before the sun, the air still carrying the cool dampness of night. The faint smell of wood smoke lingers from the previous evening's fire. The shutters are closed, but a thin line of pale light creeps in through a crack, just enough to hint that dawn is near. You lie still for a moment, hearing the muted creak of the beams above you and the faint drip of water from the eaves outside. You know this is the quietest hour you will have all day. Once you rise, there will be no pause. The life of a matchmaker is not a leisurely one, though outsiders may think so. People imagine you spend your hours sipping tea and introducing smiling couples. But the truth is that every introduction is the result of long hours of listening, assessing, and convincing, and occasionally apologizing. You push off the wool blanket, the coarse fabric leaving faint ridges on your skin. The air bites, reminding you that spring in Krakow is still closer to winter than to summer. You keep your socks on as you shuffle to the small washstand in the corner. The water in the earthenware jug is cold enough to sting your fingertips as you splash it on your face. It wakes you completely, though you feel the chill deep in your bones. From outside, you hear the muffled sound of wagon wheels over cobblestones. Some are already beginning their work. Bakers lighting ovens, milk sellers preparing their pails, laborers heading toward the city gates. You know that being up this early will give you a small advantage. A matchmaker's work depends as much on timing as on tact. Arriving at a home too late means catching a father in a foul mood after a poor market morning. Arriving too early risks interrupting his prayers. You light a small beeswax taper and set it in a shallow dish, the faint honey scent warming the air. It illuminates your small work table, where your writing box rests. The lid is scratched from years of travel, but the lock still works. Inside are your folded scraps of parchment, your stub of sealing wax, and your one good quill, kept wrapped in linen to protect the tip. These will be in use later today, but for now, you keep them in place. You sit on the edge of your bed, pulling on a plain wool tunic, the dark brown one that signals modesty without looking shabby. Matchmakers must dress carefully. Too fine, and you seem as though you are competing with your clients. Too plain, and they think you cannot possibly know how to advise a family with taste. Somewhere between the two is the right path, though no one agrees exactly where that is. Historians still argue whether matchmakers of this period wore any particular insignia to mark their trade. No consistent record survives. The floorboards under your feet are cool as you bend to lace your shoes. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders and pause to listen again. A rooster crows from somewhere in the lane, answered by another farther off. The faintest blush of gold touches the sky, just visible through the shutter gap. You take a deep breath of the still, damp air and let it fill your chest. Today, you have 3 visits to make before noon, and none of them will be straightforward. A wealthy merchant's daughter, a modest clothmaker's son, and a distant cousin to a minor noble, each with different expectations, each with a family convinced their child could do better. You think briefly of how much easier this would be if people valued kindness over coin, but you dismiss the thought. In this work, practicality wins over sentiment. You step to the door, lifting the latch slowly so it does not clatter. The hinges give a faint groan, and the cool morning air flows in. Outside, the street is dim, quiet but not silent. A single cart passes, the driver nodding to you without slowing. You nod back, pulling your shawl tighter. There is no hurry yet. You will walk the narrow lanes toward the merchant quarter, the cobblestones still slick with dew. By the time the sun clears the rooftops, you will be seated in someone's front room, sipping their thin beer, and hearing all the reasons why their son or daughter is too good for half the eligible people in the city. But for now, you enjoy the rare calm of this moment, knowing that it will not last. You set the latch back into place and return to your table, where the small traveling chest sits like a patient animal. The wood is dark from oil and handling, its corners rubbed smooth by years of being tucked under benches and carried through doorways that were never quite wide enough. You lift the lid gently so it does not creak and breathe in the smell that rises dust. A little resin, a little wax, the private scent of your trade. Inside, you see the familiar order that lets your mind settle. Parchment scraps lie stacked in a neat sheath, each trimmed to the width of your palm. You like them small, Not because you fear words, but because a small slip keeps messages modest and polite. Big pages look like proclamations. Small pages read as confidences. You touch the top piece, then slide it aside to check the next, counting by feel as much as sight. You keep the edges aligned, squared to the wood, as if tidy paper could promise tidy people. Your one good quill rests in its linen sleeve. It is goose, cut in a firm angle and cured just enough to hold a point. You draw it out and test the nib on your thumb, feeling for any burr that might tear a line. Satisfied, you set it beside the little horn inkwell, stoppered with cork. You hold the well up to the taper, peering to judge the depth. There is enough ink for the morning's notes, though you pinch the cork tighter. A spilled well makes ruin of a day. Nearby sits your bag of pounce, a fine powder ground from cuttlefish bone, which you sprinkle lightly over fresh letters to fix them against smudging. A mainstream fact: quills, parchment, and pounce are the ordinary tools of writing in your century, still favored even as paper grows common in the cities. Beside the writing, things lies your wax, a short red stick, the end bloomed with use. You keep your seal wrapped in cloth, the little brass matrix carved with a simple device, a sprig of rue within a circle, not noble, not borrowed, just yours. You turn it in your fingers, watching the taper's flame catch its face, and you feel the small reassurance sharpen your patience. A seal does not make your words true, but it makes them deliberate. That is often enough. You reach for the narrow tray that holds the thin lengths of ribbon you buy by the ell from the haberdasher, plain colors, gentle ones. Ribbon ties a note to a posy, tethers a gift to a promise, draws a neat bow under a name that might otherwise feel naked. You run the fabric between finger and thumb, then coil it back. In the corner of the chest you keep a small purse with copper coins and 2 bits of silver. You count them silently, knowing to the coin how many steps of persuasion they can purchase. A sweet for a sulking child, a pastry for a tired maid, a discreet tip for a doorman who prefers to remember your knock kindly. Folded under the ribbons is a battered square of linen, stiff with dried grains of pounce and speckled with old ink. You use it to blot in a hurry when a name is long and the line is wet. Next to it, carefully rolled, is your measure string, knotted in finger widths. It seems foolish to some, but you have found it useful for remembering table breadths and hallway turns when describing a house to a family who cannot yet imagine another's thresholds. A quirky tidbit: you also keep a crumb of stale rye bread in a linen twist pressed gently. It drinks up a fresh blot and leaves fewer specks than your sleeve. You close your eyes and recite the list that steadies you: slips, quill, pounce, wax, seal, ribbons, measure, coins, bread, 2 spare corks, a sprig of rue. You murmur it like a prayer, then open your eyes and confirm each piece by touch. The habit is not superstition, you tell yourself, though it runs beside it like a shadow. Forgetfulness is the enemy of a tidy day. A tidy day is the friend of a tidy outcome. Your work lives and dies on such small helps. You draw out a heavier sheet, one of the nicer pieces of paper you reserve for formal notes. Paper is easier to write on than parchment and cheaper besides. And in Krakow, you can buy a stack that will last a season if you write small. You cut a neat strip from the edge to serve as today's first token. A little line with a name and a time, folded once around a sprig of something green. You trim the quill with your small penknife, set the blade back into its sheath, then unstopper the ink and breathe on the nib before touching it to the surface. The scratch is satisfying, a crisp whisper that says the tool is keen in your hand, steady. You write the merchant's family name with a slow hand, shaping each letter with the care you cannot expect others to give their promises. Then a line for the hour, not too early, not too late, and a phrase so polite it becomes almost invisible. You dust the wet line with pounce, blow gently, and watch the faint cloud drift like flour. Your breath fogs the cold ink for an instant before the black settles into itself. You shake the pounce back into its little bag by the pinch, tapping the paper's edge so no grit lingers to scratch the next line. You reach into the basket on the window ledge for the tied bundle of dried herbs. Rue, yes. You choose 3 small leaves, the color pleasingly dull, the scent clean and a little sharp. A name bound to a green sprig travels better than a naked slip. It reads as thought, not haste. You lay the leaves across the folded paper, wrap a pale ribbon around them twice, and tug the bow until it holds firm without pinching. The loop looks neat enough that the aunt of the house might save it in a drawer, which never hurts you. You check your other notes, the clothmaker's son, the cousin to the minor noble, and decide which must be written now and which can be left to your tongue alone. Words spoken face to face carry warmth that ink cannot, but some words require a line to fix them, a reminder that can be read again at a table when you are not present to explain yourself. You choose one more slip for a cautious promise. There may be interest, there may be patience, there will be no hurry. You love that last phrase. It often works better than flattery. For a moment, you linger over the little astrological table tucked beneath the bottom tray, not for public use and not for show. Just a folded sheet with the names of the planets and their dignities. A set of quick notes copied long ago. You do not swear by it, but you also do not ignore it when an anxious mother asks whether the moon looks kindly on Tuesday. You tuck it back into its place. A scholarly uncertainty. Historians still argue whether city matchmakers like you commonly practiced astrology in earnest or merely kept such tables to satisfy clients who did. You set your seal and wax in easy reach, then close the chest most of the way and rest your palm against the lid. You review the other rules that press on your craft, the church's insistence on proper form, the band's cried in parish, the need for witnesses who are sober enough to be believed. After the great council in the West, priests in many parishes now keep cleaner books and expect marriages to be made openly before a cleric and proper witnesses, which changes how quietly a promise can be arranged. You adapt because you must. A good matchmaker bends enough to keep from breaking. You slide the chest strap over your shoulder and feel its familiar weight settle against your hip. One last glance at the room. One last check of the taper's small pool of wax. You pinch the flame out and watch the thin ribbon of smoke curl toward the ceiling beam. The first true light of morning slips around the shutter, silver gray and soft, bright enough now to show the dust that rests in the air like flour waiting to be breathed. You draw your shawl close and lift the latch again. The day is waiting, as it always does, full of people certain of their needs, uncertain of their hearts, and very sure that you will sort them both. You step into the lane with your chest held steady, your tools in quiet order, and your mind unrumpled. The cobbles are damp, the air smells faintly of yeast and smoke, and your shoes make that small, tidy sound you like, purposeful without being proud. You pause a moment at the corner of your street, adjusting the strap of your chest so it rests comfortably against your hip. The air is cool enough that you can see your breath, a faint cloud that lingers and then drifts away toward the eaves. The city is not yet bustling, but here and there shutters open with a slow creak, letting in the pale morning light. Somewhere nearby, a woman throws the last of her wash water into the gutter, and you hear it trickle away along the uneven stones. Today requires a particular care in presentation. Clothes for a matchmaker are more than warmth or modesty. They are part of the conversation before any words are spoken. You keep walking, but your mind is already on the garments folded in the cedar chest at home. You will turn back soon to dress properly. Your route to the clothier's is a short one, but you take it deliberately slow. Passing by the open arch of the baker's shop, you glance inside. Loaves are lined on the wooden boards, still pale, waiting to go into the great oven. The smell is faint but promising, and it will grow stronger by the time you return. A cat sits at the threshold, tail curled neatly, watching for crumbs that might appear when the boards are swept. At the clothier's, you run your hand over the bolts of wool stacked on the bench. You know the feel. You're looking for something with enough weight to drape well, but not so thick as to make you sweat when a family's parlor fire is too large for the room. You settle on a length in a muted green, the kind of color that suggests reliability without dullness. It is not new cloth for you today. You are only imagining the feel of it, but your mind rehearses the choice, so you are ready when the time comes to replace your current tunic. Back at your lodging, you open the cedar chest. The faint resin scent rises, sharp and clean, covering the softer smell of wool. Inside, your tunics are folded in neat stacks. You lift the brown one you wore on your first call yesterday and set it aside. Today, you choose a darker green, simple in cut, with sleeves just long enough to hide the ink stains on your wrists. You shake it out gently, smoothing the creases with your palm. A mainstream fact: wool, often dyed in plant-based colors like walnut, weld, or madder, was the standard fabric for both men and women in 16th century Poland, valued for its durability and warmth. You lay out the undershift, first linen, washed thin with years of wear, but still soft against the skin. It smells faintly of lye soap and sunshine from where it dried on the line yesterday. Over this goes the tunic, the green sitting well against the lighter underlayer. The fit is neither tight nor loose. You have learned that too much tailoring invites unnecessary comment. You tie a simple belt at your waist, the leather worn smooth from years of being fastened in the same hole. From the small shelf near the window, you take your head covering a linen kerchief, clean and plain, folded into a neat triangle. You drape it over your hair, tucking the ends just so. Hair is a subject of its own in this work. Too tightly covered and people think you are hiding age or vanity. Too loose and they whisper about impropriety. Somewhere in the middle is the safest ground. Historians still argue whether matchmakers had any distinct style or badge that marked them in public. No surviving law or guild record clearly states it, but you know that people notice details even if they pretend not to. Shoes come last, plain leather, well oiled, with soles thick enough for walking the city but thin enough to feel the ground beneath you. The laces bite into your fingers as you pull them snug. You stand and step once, twice, listening for any creak that might draw attention in a quiet hall. Satisfied, you fasten your shawl over your shoulders and let the ends hang evenly. Before you leave, you check the small wooden mirror hung beside the door. The glass is faintly warped, so your reflection bends at the edges, but the center is clear enough. You see yourself as others will: modest, tidy, alert. Your eyes look a little tired from rising early, but that can be mended by a brisk walk. You adjust the kerchief one last time, then lift the strap of your chest and step into the lane. The city is waking in earnest now. A fish seller calls from the market square, his voice carrying even down these narrower lanes. You smell the first loaves baking, warm and yeasty. 2 apprentices hurry past you, carrying bundles of kindling between them. A cart laden with barrels rattles toward the river gate, the driver muttering to his horse as it picks its way over the stones. Your path will take you through the market quarter before you reach your first call. It is not the shortest route, but it allows you to be seen, not loitering, not rushing, but present. A matchmaker's business is made as much in passing glances as in arranged meetings. People remember you when they see you in the flow of the city. They think of you later. When the matter of marriage comes up over bread or ale, you let the rhythm of your steps steady your thoughts. In your chest, the notes and ribbons rest in quiet order, waiting for the hands they will pass into. The day will be full of words and small judgments, but right now there is only the sound of your shoes against the stones, the faint rattle of your chest's clasp, and the cool air on your face. You follow the slope of the lane toward the merchant quarter, where the houses stand straighter and the eaves throw deeper shade. Your steps slow before a brick facade whose red has darkened with age and smoke. The doorway is arched and framed with pale stone, the threshold worn smooth by decades of careful feet. You pause long enough to steady your chest against your hip, then lift the iron knocker and let it fall once, twice, with a courteous weight that says you are expected but not impatient. A servant opens a young man with careful hair and a linen shirt too fine to be his own. His eyes flick to your shawl, your kerchief, your chest, and then he lowers his head in a motion that means both welcome and watchfulness. You give your name softly, add the hour that was agreed, and he steps back to let you pass into the stone passage that leads toward the light. The house quiets the street at once. Your ears fill instead with the small sounds of a wealthy morning, a poker touching coals, a broom's bristles whispering across tiles, the soft shuffle of slippers beyond a half-shut door. The passage opens into a little inner court, a square of sky framed by galleries. A vine climbs the wall in a patient spiral, last year's tendrils brittle against the brick. From here, a second door brings you into the family's parlor. The room smells of wax and warm clay. The tile stove in the corner is already giving a steady, considerate heat. Green glazed tiles rise in stacked stories, each face molded with a leaf or a small saint, the edges trimmed in a darker band. You hold your hands near the stove just long enough to feel the chill leave your fingers. A mainstream fact. Tile stoves were common heaters in 16th century Polish townhouses, prized for steady warmth that lingered long after the fire burned low. Your eyes settle on the furnishings in the way you have trained them to. Do not covetous, not careless, and never startled. There is a long table under the window with turned legs, a carved chest against the far wall, two high-backed chairs with narrow seats, a wool carpet hanging like a painting, its pattern of knots and vines catching the pale light. The floorboards are swept clean. Sprigs of something green, perhaps rue, perhaps savory, rest on the sill in a little earthen bowl, as if to bless the morning air. The mistress of the house enters with the same composed pace as yesterday and last week. She is, as you remember, a woman who keeps her keys on a ring, who notices dust without looking for it, who can greet you and take your measure in the same breath. You bow your head just enough and greet her by name, using the respectful form. She offers you a place on the bench near the stove, then gestures for the servant to bring beer. While he goes, she settles opposite and folds her hands, palms resting lightly on her skirt, as if smoothing a thought. You begin with weather-safe ground, firm enough to set a foot upon, then turn gently to her daughter. You speak the name with care, as though it were a porcelain cup that must not be set down too hard. The mother listens with a face that gives almost nothing away. When she does answer, it is to say that her daughter is at her prayers, and that is where a good girl should be at this hour. You agree without flourish, letting the simplicity of assent do its work. The servant returns with 2 beakers and a small jug. He pours, and you see at once the color of the beer, soft gold, thin foam, the hint of sweetness that tells you it has been mixed with water. It is not an insult. It is morning prudence, and also kindness to a guest whose tongue must stay clear. You take a small sip, taste grain and a little bitterness, and set the beaker down on the table's edge. A scholarly uncertainty. Historians still argue whether households regularly watered beer for visitors, or whether strengths varied so much by brew and season that small beer and table beer were more habits of language than fixed grades. The talk is ordinary in its bones, but bones keep bodies upright. You ask whether the house is satisfied with its servants, whether trade has been steady since the last fair, whether the men from Gdańsk came on time with the cloth that was paid for in winter. She answers in sentences polished down to courtesy. She does not say so, but you can tell the husband is away on business. He would be sitting straighter if he were home. The household air would have that stronger smell of decisions. To one side, a small shelf holds a row of plates, pewter for the most part, 1 or 2, with a touch of blue glaze that has traveled far to reach this wall. In front of the stove, a low stool sits with a cushion that lives there always. Its cover is darned carefully where a seam split last year. Near your feet, a wooden tub rests under a cloth. The cloth trembles almost invisibly. When your hostess notices your glance, she smiles. "Carp," she says, as if telling you the day of the week. "He will wait until Friday." You nod, understanding. A quirky tidbit. In many towns, prosperous households kept live carp in a tub in the kitchen or parlor before fasting days. The fish fed with breadcrumbs until it met the pot. When the moment feels right, you take a slip from your chest. You do not set it down yet. You let it rest in your hand like a promise that will be made only if invited. You speak of a young man from a family of cloth makers, steady, with a shop of his own and a sister who keeps accounts neatly. You mention that his mother and aunt live nearby, which can be both comfort and friction, and you do not pretend otherwise. You praise moderately, keeping your words as even as the woven weft you are describing. Your hostess asks about the father's health, about the debts carried, about kin who might claim favors at unwelcome hours. These are precise questions, and you answer them with the same patient exactness. You make no boasting claims. You do not swear to virtues you have not measured. You say instead that the young man's word has weight in his shop and that his neighbors rent him a place on the bench during parish meetings not because he is loud but because he is consistent. You see the corner of her mouth soften. Reliability has a quiet shine of its own. She asks about age. You answer plainly. She asks about the young man's skill with numbers. You answer that he adds without his lips moving and subtracts without sighing, which makes her smile again. She asks whether his hair is thick. This is asked not out of vanity, but out of a long memory that baldness began early in a certain uncle's line, and with it, a temper. You say the hair is serviceable and kept short enough to look clean even in hot weather. She nods. Your hostess leans back a little, enough to mark a stage in the talk. She says her daughter can be dutiful and cheerful if treated respectfully, and stubborn if treated as a linen press. She says the girl reads the holy stories, sews a seam that does not twist, and has a way of quieting a baby that even the midwife notices. You hold your breath for a beat at that last detail. It is the kind of small light that can burn through 3 layers of doubt. You ask whether the daughter would like to be near the market. The mother answers that the girl is not afraid of noise and knows the names of the sellers' wives as well as the sellers. You set the slip on the table and draw from your writing chest the sprig of rue you tucked there earlier. You place it across the folded paper, tie it with the ribbon you cut for this house, and turn the knot so that the loop sits smooth and equal. The mother watches your fingers. In this stillness, a match is no grand affair. It is the patient binding of one small courtesy to another. A little movement at the door makes you turn. A girl stands there, not a child, no longer free of the mirror either, with a kerchief in her hand, and the kind of frank eyes that sometimes make meetings easier. She does not step in. She only bows and waits to be acknowledged. Her mother lifts a hand and the girl vanishes like a shy bird. You say nothing. You are careful not to chase a moment that must come to you. The servant appears again with a plate of small biscuits flecked with caraway. You take one because refusal in such houses reads like disdain. The biscuit crumbles neatly between your teeth, the seeds leaving a taste that lingers, clean and faintly sweet. You finish your watered beer and set the beaker down with its lip just beyond the ring of moisture it left, so the rim will not stick. There is a last question, the one that is always last because it means the morning has done its work. Would introductions be proper at the feast of the coming saint, when the square will be lively and no one's attention will feel caught? You answer that the very liveliness will keep tongues from wagging too directly. You suggest a bench beneath the lime trees, a ribbon for the girl's basket, a rose from the clothmaker's aunt's garden that can be pinned without fuss. The mother nods again, and you know that the day has tilted, just slightly, in your favor. When you rise, the room seems warmer. You thank your hostess for the beer, for the courtesy, for the time given to a matter that must be done slowly if it is to be done well. She walks with you to the passage and stops there, as is proper. The servant sees you to the door. Outside, the air has changed. The street is busier. The voices have thickened. You lift your chest strap higher and step back into the stream of the city, carrying with you the taste of caraway, the warmth of a green glazed stove, and the small weight of a promise folded under ribbon. You take the longer way to your next call, winding through lanes where the houses lean toward each other like neighbors trading secrets. The stones here are narrower and more uneven, so you watch your footing as you walk. A thin breeze carries the smell of damp plaster and, somewhere farther on, frying onions. You pass a row of shops just waking shutters propped open to reveal shelves of pottery, bolts of rough cloth, baskets piled high with onions and garlic. A dog dozes under one bench, lifting its head just enough to track your steps before deciding you are not worth the energy. The second house of the morning belongs to the family of the clothmaker's son, the young man you mentioned earlier. This house is different from the merchant's. Plainer in front, with smaller windows and a door whose paint has worn away in patches to show the grain of the wood. A little bundle of dried herbs hangs above the lintel, a charm against misfortune. You pause to straighten your shawl before knocking, making sure your appearance carries the same modest respect you showed the merchant's household. A middle-aged man answers the young man's uncle, as you recall. His face is pleasant but guarded, and you note the flecks of thread clinging to his tunic. He smells faintly of lanolin and dye. He greets you without formality, gestures you in, and you step into a narrow room where the walls are lined with wooden frames for stretching cloth. Several lengths of wool hang to dry, their colors muted in the low light. The uncle leads you to a bench along the wall. There is no stove in here, just the warmth of wool and the faint hiss of the kettle in the next room. Soon a woman appears, the young man's mother carrying 2 cups and a small ceramic jug. She pours without asking, and you recognize the pale green infusion at once. It is mint with a touch of honey, the scent curling up in the steam. You wrap your hands around the cup, letting the warmth reach your fingers. You open the conversation with thanks for the tea, then move to the young man's work. His mother nods as you speak, occasionally glancing toward the open doorway as though expecting him to appear. You remark on his steady trade, his careful accounts, his willingness to work long hours at the loom. She smiles at that, though she quickly adds that work is not everything. A wife must not be left to sit alone at supper. You agree. You say that his temperament is suited to steady companionship, not just steady weaving. The uncle leans forward then, his hands resting on his knees. He wants to know about the girl, her skill in keeping a household, her family's reputation, the state of her dowry. You answer plainly, adding that the girl is said to have a good memory for names, which always helps in trade. A mainstream fact. In 16th century Poland, dowry negotiations were a crucial part of marriage arrangements, often involving both movable goods and cash, and sometimes property rights. Your mention of memory prompts the mother to tell a small story about her son, how he remembers the exact measurement of a bolt sold years ago and the name of the buyer's second cousin. You let the story run its course without interruption, knowing such details serve you better than anything you could invent. There is a pause in the talk, and the uncle takes the chance to voice a concern. He says he has heard that the merchant's daughter, though dutiful, might be inclined towards stubbornness. You acknowledge the point, then add that a little firmness can be useful when managing servants or bargaining with suppliers. You remind them gently that a quiet girl can still be willful, and a talkative one can still be agreeable, depending on the day and the company. Your cup is nearly empty when the mother leans closer. She lowers her voice and asks, almost as if ashamed, whether the girl is proper in her piety. This is a question you have learned to answer without offending either modesty or curiosity. You say that she is regular in attending Mass, that she observes the holy days, and that she has been seen giving alms without making a show of it. This seems to satisfy them both. From somewhere down the hall comes the sound of a loom starting up, the rhythmic thunk and clatter of the shuttle running. You realize the young man is working now, perhaps listening to the hum of voices, but choosing not to intrude. A quirky tidbit. Some cloth makers kept small bells tied to their shuttles so they could hear if a weaver's rhythm faltered, signaling a problem in the weaving. The mother excuses herself briefly and returns with a plate of poppy seed rolls. You take one, the sugar dusting your fingers as you break it apart. The sweetness is a pleasant counter to the mint tea. You thank her and let the talk drift into smaller things, the weather, the trouble with geese in the street, the rising cost of salt. When you judge the moment right, you suggest the saint's feast as a good meeting place, just as you did with the merchant's household. You describe the market stalls, the music, the safe bustle of the square. The uncle exchanges a glance with the mother, and you can see that they are already picturing it. Before you leave, the uncle asks whether you will carry word to them if the merchant's family shows interest. You assure him that you will, and that such things must be timed carefully. You set down your empty cup, brush the sugar from your hands, and rise. The mother walks you to the door, wishing you a safe walk. Outside, the day is warmer, the air carrying the smell of fresh bread from the bakeries nearby. You step back into the lane, adjusting the strap of your chest, and turn toward your next call, the cousin to the minor noble. The city seems busier now, and you feel the day beginning to quicken around you. You leave the clothmaker's lane behind and make your way toward the quieter streets, where the stone houses grow larger and the wooden balconies lean out like watchful faces. The sun is higher now, though still pale in the spring haze, and the light bounces off the pale plaster walls in a way that makes the shadows seem cooler than they are. Your path curves gently uphill toward the quarter where the cousin to the minor noble keeps her household, not so grand as the city's magnates, but still a few steps above most. The house stands at a corner where two lanes meet. Its timber frame is painted dark against the lime-washed walls, and the upper floor juts over the lower in the old style. You notice the shutters on the second floor are painted a deep blue, the color of gentian, a small but deliberate mark of expense. The front door is heavy oak, iron-banded, with a brass knocker in the shape of a lion's head. You take hold of the ring and let it fall twice, each knock spaced just so polite, but not hesitant. A maid opens, young but sharp-eyed, and she gives you the look of someone who will remember both your name and your shoes. You introduce yourself, explaining your errand without hurry. She steps aside and gestures you into a narrow hall lined with woven rush mats. The faint scent of lavender lingers here, probably from the linen chests nearby. You are led into a receiving room with a wide window looking onto a small walled garden. A pear tree stands in the corner, its buds just beginning to swell. The garden is neat, but not ornamental herbs in ordered beds. A bench under the wall, a single clay jar catching rainwater from a spout. Inside, the furniture is solid and well kept. A long bench with cushions in dark green wool, a low table, and a carved chair with arms so wide they could balance a platter. Your hostess enters without ceremony, moving with the easy assurance of someone accustomed to being listened to. She wears a gown of dark wool, plain in cut but trimmed with a narrow band of embroidery at the cuffs. Her hair is covered with a crisp linen veil, pinned neatly so not a strand escapes. She greets you by name, always a point in your favor, and invites you to sit. The maid returns with a small tray holding a covered cup and a plate of thin honey cakes. The cover lifts to reveal spiced wine, warm enough to send a faint curl of steam into the cool air. You thank her and take a careful sip. The cinnamon sits lightly on the tongue, with a shadow of clove beneath. A mainstream fact. In 16th century Poland, spiced wine was a favored hospitality drink among wealthier households, often served warm in the cooler months and flavored with imported spices from the Baltic trade. You begin with the ordinary pleasantries, her health, the comfort of her household, the state of the city market. She answers with clipped but cordial replies, her gaze steady as she weighs your words. When you turn the conversation toward her cousin, she leans back slightly, her fingers lacing together in her lap. The cousin, she says, is a man of some learning, though not bookish to excess. He keeps his accounts well, maintains his land, and is known to settle disputes in the village without calling for the local court. She does not pretend that his fortunes are without limit, there is no need, but she makes it clear that his standing is secure. You ask, gently, whether he seeks a wife from within the city, or whether he would consider a family from farther afield. She answers that the city has its advantages, trade, connections, a certain polish, but that a country-bred wife often has skills the city girls do not, especially in managing a household without servants in every room. The talk turns to the matter of temperament. You say that you have in mind a young woman whose manners are sound, whose upbringing has been careful, and whose family keeps to the church's ways. You speak slowly, leaving space between the virtues so none seem crowded. A quirky tidbit. Some matchmakers of the time were known to compare a potential bride's temperament to the keeping qualities of different grains, wheat for steadiness, rye for resilience, barley for sweetness. Though you keep that habit to yourself here. Your hostess listens without interrupting, though you can tell by the slight tilt of her head that she is measuring every syllable. At last, she asks whether the girl can manage both a town dwelling and a country house, should seasons or business require it. You answer that she has lived in both settings, and that she can make do with little or manage with plenty, depending on the day. This seems to please her. There is a pause, and the sound of a pigeon cooing in the garden drifts through the open shutter. You set down your cup and take one of the honey cakes, the thin pastry flaking under your fingers. It is sweet without heaviness, the kind that leaves your mouth clear enough for more talking. You let the silence rest for a few breaths, before suggesting the saint's feast as a fitting occasion for an introduction, the crowd lending ease, the bustle keeping curious eyes from focusing too sharply. Your hostess nods, saying that her cousin will be in the city for that week, and that such a meeting might be arranged without seeming forced. Historians still argue whether such minor nobles in the 16th century kept strict control over every introduction, or whether they relied on intermediaries like you to handle the subtler work. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. In any case, you know when to let a door open quietly without pushing it wide. The talk drifts to other matters, the lateness of this year's frost, the rumor of new tolls on the river, the scarcity of saffron in the market. You answer lightly where you can, listening more than you speak. Your cup is refilled once, then covered again, signaling the visit's natural end. You rise, thank her for the wine and her time, and promise to send word if arrangements can be made. She walks with you to the hall, the lavender scent brushing your senses again. The maid opens the door, and you step back into the street, the blue shutters catching the midday light. The lane is busier now, vendors calling, apprentices darting between errands, the clatter of a distant smithy riding on the air. You adjust the strap of your chest, feeling its familiar weight, and set off toward the market. The morning's 3 calls are behind you, but the day's real work, fitting these separate threads into a pattern, has only just begun. The market greets you before you even see it, the voices rising and falling like the sea, the smells shifting with every step. Roasted nuts mingle with damp wool, crushed herbs, fresh bread, and the faint tang of fish. You slow your pace, not because you are tired, but because this is a place where information moves at the speed of strolling feet. The stalls stand in crooked rows, each draped with cloth to shield the wares from the sun. You pass the spice cellar, first his table, a scatter of small wooden boxes, each holding a different fragrance. Cloves, pepper, cinnamon, and one that he claims is nutmeg from so far away you can only smile politely at the story. The next stall is the cheesemonger's, its boards laid with rounds wrapped in cloth, their rinds dusted in flour to keep off the flies. You nod to faces you know, the widow who sells onions, the 2 brothers who deal in smoked fish, the basket maker whose hands never stop moving even as he talks. Each greeting is a thread, each glance a stitch. You are not here to shop in earnest, but to listen. Gossip moves differently in the market. It does not travel in shouts. It travels in lowered voices, in the pause before a price is given, in the space between a question and an answer. You linger by the stall of the comb maker, pretending to study the teeth of horn combs while 2 women nearby speak of a family you know. They do not name names at first, but their words, a match that came to nothing, sharpen your ears. You learn in fragments that the family of a certain tanner's daughter has quietly withdrawn her from an arrangement. The reason is given as differences of temper, which can mean anything from loud arguments to mismatched expectations about dowry. You tuck this away, not for use today, perhaps not even this month, but knowledge like that can shape the edge of a conversation when you least expect it. Moving on, you pass the herb seller's stall. Bundles of thyme, marjoram, and rue hang from the canopy, the air heavy with their scents. You buy a small bundle of rue, partly because you will use it, partly because standing here gives you a clear view of the bread seller's corner. From there, you catch sight of 2 servants exchanging news while their baskets are filled. You cannot hear every word, but you catch enough to know they are talking about a household where tempers are short and the mistress's health is failing. You file this too. A mainstream fact. In 16th century Polish towns, open markets were not only for trade in goods, but also central to the exchange of local news, often serving as informal information networks. Near the edge of the market, you spot a figure you would rather avoid another matchmaker, older than you, with a sharp chin and a voice that carries too far. She is speaking with a group of women, gesturing in a way that says she is trying to impress. You turn down a side lane before she notices you. 2 matchmakers in one place is not always a quarrel, but it can be a tangle of crossed stories and mismatched promises. The side lane is quieter, lined with smaller stalls, beeswax candles, dyed ribbons, a man selling songbooks in rough binding. Here, you pause at the ribbon stall, fingering a length of pale blue silk. You do not need it now, but you note the price and the seller's mood for later. The silk catches the light in a way that makes you think of a certain merchant's daughter and how she might respond to a gift tied in that shade. You step back into the main square, where a juggler has drawn a small crowd. Children laugh, clapping at the toss of bright balls into the air. You let yourself watch for a moment. The rhythm is soothing, the arc of the object steady, predictable. You know the feeling, keeping several threads in the air at once, each needing attention but none allowed to fall. A quirky tidbit. Jugglers sometimes performed at fairs in Polish cities, not only for entertainment, but to advertise for taverns or shops, drawing customers toward a particular street. Historians still argue whether matchmakers openly frequented markets for work, or if they preferred more private meeting places to avoid the appearance of selling marriage arrangements like goods. You know that the truth is simpler. The market is where people are, and where people are, stories follow. By the time you reach the far side of the square, you have gathered enough small pieces of gossip to keep your mind busy for the next week. Not all of it will prove useful, but enough will. You adjust the strap of your chest and head toward a quiet bench near the fountain, where you can sort your thoughts. The fountain's water falls in a steady trickle, its stone basin worn smooth where people lean to draw buckets. You sit, letting the murmured voices of passers-by wash over you. The rue you bought rests on your lap, its scent sharp enough to cut through the smells of the market. You close your eyes for a moment, not in weariness, but to listen without looking. The voices blur together, just sound and tone the music of the city breathing around you. When you rise, the day feels a little more in your grasp. The market's chatter has given you what you came for. Not a single decisive fact, but a dozen small ones, each ready to be woven into the work ahead. You step away from the fountain, turning toward your next errand. The stone under your feet warm now from the midday sun. You follow the quieter lane that skirts the market square, the sound of the crowd dimming behind you. The air here is warmer, carrying the smell of bread from a bakery's open shutters. Ahead, the crooked line of buildings breaks into a small open court, where an old fig tree leans over a stone bench. This is where you meet the astrologer, not a public figure, not someone with a sign hanging in the street, but a man people know how to find when they wish to. His doorway is narrow, set between a cooper's shop and a storeroom for wool. You knock lightly. The wood is warm from the sun. After a moment, the door opens just enough to let you slip inside. The air changes at once dim, cool, scented with wax and herbs. Shelves line the walls, cluttered with small clay jars, rolled charts, and the occasional glint of brass instruments whose purpose you only partly understand. The astrologer is a wiry man with careful hands and eyes that never seem hurried. He greets you without surprise, motioning toward the table where a square of parchment lies weighted at the corners. A small window lets in a blade of sunlight that cuts across the table, catching the edge of an inkwell. You tell him the name of the merchant's daughter and the clothmaker's son, and he begins to draw lines across a circle on the parchment. His quill scratches softly, the sound steady and deliberate. He asks for their birth dates, their hours if known, and the cities where they were born. You give what you have, and where you do not know, you say so plainly. He marks the positions of the planets, the moon's path, the angles between them. His lips move silently as he counts. You watch without pressing. Part of this is performance, part habit, and part, perhaps, something more, a mainstream fact. In 16th century Poland, astrology was often practiced alongside medicine and weather prediction, and some households consulted astrologers for marriage compatibility. At length, he leans back and taps the page with one finger. He says the signs are not opposed, which is a good beginning. He notes that both have a certain steadiness in their natures, though there is a risk of stubbornness if the moon's influence is ignored. He advises introducing them on a day when Venus is in a favorable position, which, he says, will occur next week conveniently near the feast day you had in mind. You nod, storing the date in your memory. You ask about the noble's cousin as well, and he traces a few more lines. Here, his answer is less precise, a possibility of good fortune, but also a shadow of delay, which might mean nothing or everything. Historians still argue whether astrologers of the period truly believed in their readings or shaped them to suit the moment and the client's needs. You have long since decided that belief is less important than the use of the words afterward. Before you leave, he opens a small wooden box and takes out a sprig of dried marigold. He presses it into your hand, saying it is a charm for patience. You accept it, knowing that even if it holds no virtue in the stars, it will serve as a talking piece when you hand it to someone who thinks it does. You pay him in coin and a small ribbon, not as a bribe, but as a token. He slips it into the folds of his robe without looking at it, already turning back to his charts. You step out into the street again, blinking against the sudden brightness. The market noise returns, though softer at this edge. You tuck the marigold into your chest beside the rue, the two scents mingling in a way that is not unpleasant. Your steps take you toward the merchant's quarter again, but you walk slowly, considering what you will say and what you will not say when you deliver the date. A jingle of harness makes you step aside as a cart passes, its wheels rumbling over the stones. The driver nods at you, and you nod back. You think of how many quiet exchanges like that pass in a day: nods, glances, the brief touch of hands, each one a small stitch in the cloth of the city. By the time you reach the next turning, you have the outline of your plan in mind. The date from the astrologer will be mentioned to the merchant's household, not as a certainty, but as a fortunate coincidence. To the clothmaker's family, it will be offered as a suggestion, framed in the language of prudence. Neither will know you have spoken to the other in exactly the same way. You pass the fig tree again on your way back toward the busier streets. The bench beneath it is now occupied by two apprentices eating bread and cheese, their voices low, their laughter quick. You catch only a phrase about a shoemaker's daughter and let it drift past you. Not all gossip is worth the weight of memory. The sun has shifted, casting shorter shadows. You adjust your shawl, feeling the warmth seep into the cloth. The day is still far from done, but each piece is beginning to find its place, not a finished picture, but the start of one, drawn in faint lines. You turn from the astrologer's lane toward a quieter quarter, where the streets run straight and the houses wear their neatness like a habit. Here, the thresholds are scrubbed, the shutters mended, and the drains kept clear with buckets of gray water flung at regular hours. You slow your pace and breathe once, twice, until your mind settles into the rhythm you need for a visit that will trade in hints rather than claims. Early news is best given like steam rising from a pot, visible, warming, and gone if grasped too hard. The doorway you seek is marked with a small painted flower above the lintel. You knock lightly and hear the quick steps of a servant, then the more measured tread of a woman whose life is organized by lists kept in her head. The door opens to reveal the bride's aunt, not old, but already the guardian of standards. She recognizes you and steps aside, a gesture that means speak softly and do not take long. Inside, the front room is tidy and bright. A woven cloth covers the table. A bowl of apples sits at the center, their skins polished to a soft shine. The tiled stove gives a gentle heat that stays mostly where it should. Near the window, an embroidery frame waits with its hoop ready, the needle stuck neatly into the cloth so it will not be lost. You set your chest on the bench and greet the aunt with the respect you know she expects. The bride appears a moment later, not quite entering, then entering fully when the aunt nods. She carries a small basket of mending, more for something to do with her hands than from necessity. You say her name with care and ask after her mother's health, her own sleep, her prayers. She answers simply, with a composure that speaks of practice. Her eyes are steady, but you see the flicker that tells you she has guessed why you have come. You begin with pleasantries, because that is the ground on which any delicate talk must stand. The streets are drying after the last rain. The washerwomen say the wind will change by tomorrow. The market pears were better this week than last. Then, as the aunt pours small cups of warmed ale with a curl of spice, you let the conversation tilt. You remark that a certain family, respectable and steady, asked after the well-being of their neighbors to the east, which is to say, this house, with a tone that sounded like more than mere politeness. You do not name the young man yet. Names carry weight, and you are not ready to set that stone on the table. Instead, you speak of a shop kept in good order, of accounts that balance without sighing, of a mother who is firm without meddling. You mention a sister who can read the price marks on bales of cloth from 3 towns and never confuses them. The aunt listens with her mouth set, as if tasting a broth to judge whether it needs more salt. The girl keeps her gaze on her mending basket, though she is not mending anything. You ask whether the girl prefers the market's noise or a quieter street, whether her hands grow restless without work, or if she delights in a carefully finished seam, whether she minds the smell of wool in winter. The questions are ordinary, but they are also a kind of map. They let you measure where the day might carry you. A mainstream fact. Respectable marriages in 16th-century Polish towns were commonly arranged with the careful involvement of female kin aunts, mothers, grandmothers whose judgment about domestic skill and reputation could outweigh considerations of looks or romance. The aunt sets a small plate of ginger biscuits on the table and tells the girl to offer you one. You take it and let the sweetness sit on your tongue. You turn to the girl and ask gently, careful not to make the aunt bristle what makes her most content in a day. She answers that she likes a task that begins and ends properly. Dough that rises and bakes, a sleeve that is cut and sewn, a prayer that is said without hurry. She says it with such evenness that you feel a small, private relief. Evenness is not passion, but it is a good companion for marriage. You speak a little of the saint's feast, of the musicians who will stand near the lime trees, of the baskets tied with ribbon and the stalls of roasted nuts. You remark that you will be there on an errand for a friend, and that perhaps you will cross paths, a phrase that leaves the door wide without forcing anyone through. The aunt nods, and you see calculation move behind her eyes like a shadow crossing a floor. She asks whether the friend is given to pride or to thrift, whether he keeps feast days properly, whether he looks a person in the eye or at the ground. You answer in the kind of sentences that reassure without painting in garish colors. The girl asks one question then, so quiet that it almost does not reach the table. Does he speak kindly to those he does not need? You feel the room sharpen around that sentence. You answer that you have watched him with apprentices and with a neighbor's child who stammers, and that he keeps his voice level. You say no more. It is enough. There is the matter of signs and seasons, which some aunts wish to hear, and others wish to ignore entirely. This aunt is of the kind who will tolerate a mention if it is brief and dressed in good sense. You say that next week is favorable for new meetings, that the moon will be friendly to steady beginnings, and that if a ribbon is worn in a green shade, it will please the day. You do not mention the astrologer's name. You simply let the date float into the room like a plausible convenience. Historians still argue whether such small astrological nods were serious guides, or merely the garnish of polite talk. You find they are useful so long as they are never allowed to steer the cart. You take from your chest a slip of paper already prepared for such moments. No names, only a place, and an hour written in a hand as calm as you can make it. You set a small sprig of rue across it and tie it with a thread the color of unbleached linen. The aunt watches your fingers, the girl watches the thread. You slide the slip toward the aunt, and she lays her hand over it, not quite touching, as if testing its weight without lifting it. A quirky tidbit comes to mind, and you let it out as lightly as a breath. Some housewives keep a tiny piece of bread in the pocket of a girl's apron during a first meeting for steadiness, they say, so her words do not fly away. The aunt's mouth softens into the suggestion of a smile. The girl looks down at her apron, as if wondering whether she owns pockets at all. The talk moves to smaller matters, how the girl's mother is keeping, whether the neighbor's geese have finally learned not to wander, whether the market salt is truly as poor as people claim this month. You answer where you can, letting the air cool around the hint you have laid on the table. Early news should not be pressed. It should be allowed to sit quietly until it belongs to the house you have given it to. When you rise, the aunt stands too, a sign of approval that is not given lightly. She says that a walk on the feast day would do the girl good, that the square will be busy enough to hide any awkwardness, and that she herself has errands that might carry her past the lime trees at exactly the hour you mentioned. The girl lowers her eyes and, after a heartbeat, nods once. It is a small nod, but it is clean. You thank them for the ale and the biscuits, gather your chest, and step back into the street. The air feels a little warmer than before, or perhaps that is only the comfort of having shaped the day into a curve that looks promising. You do not allow yourself to imagine smiles or roses or the sound of laughter under the trees. You only hold on to the thing you can hold: an hour, a place, and the permission of an aunt who keeps lists in her head. As you walk away, you think of how many such moments are needed to turn two households toward each other. Not declarations, but careful, ordinary gestures, each one small enough to pass unnoticed by anyone who is not looking closely. Your work is to notice, to set the pieces down, and then to step aside before your shadow lies across them. The lane you take now bends gently downhill toward the river, where the air carries the faint, damp smell of silt. The light is soft, filtered through a thin veil of clouds, and the cobblestones shine in patches where a bucket has recently been emptied. You walk at an even pace, feeling the strap of your chest shift slightly with each step. The next house is not far, a modest dwelling on a quiet street, but the conversation there will need to be handled with special care. You are calling on the merchant's daughter again, but not in the formal manner of your earlier visit. This time, you intend to deliver only a suggestion, a thread for her to pick up if she wishes, and to do so in a way that leaves her room to decline without shame. There is a difference between an arrangement in progress and a whisper of possibility. The house is as you left it, red brick softened by soot, the pale stone framing the doorway worn to a gentle curve. A servant lets you in, and you find the daughter in a small side room, seated at a narrow table near the window. She is embroidering a length of linen, her head bent over the hoop, the thread catching the light. She greets you politely, without rising, and gestures to the bench opposite. The air in the room smells faintly of beeswax polish and the rosemary that hangs in a bunch near the window frame. A small stove in the corner ticks softly as the heat settles inside. On the table between you, a shallow dish holds a scattering of pins, a pair of shears, and a folded scrap of paper weighed down with a smooth river stone. You begin with the weather, the market's noise, the rumor that the next fair may be delayed. She responds with brief but courteous answers, her needle moving steadily in and out of the cloth. You wait until her stitches reach the end of the row before letting the talk turn. You mention, almost in passing, that a family you know spoke warmly of their son's reliability, his skill with accounts, and his patience in dealing with customers. You do not give his name, only the shape of him in words. A man who can read a contract without frowning, who knows how to keep a promise without boasting of it, who mends a relationship with the same quiet care as a frayed cuff. She listens without lifting her eyes, but the thread pauses in mid-stitch. You go on, speaking of how he keeps his shop in good order and treats his apprentices firmly but without humiliation. You add that his mother is known for her tidy household and her fair dealings in the market, a mainstream fact. In 16th century Poland, a merchant or craftsman's reputation for fair dealing could be as important in marriage negotiations as wealth or family name, especially in closely knit urban communities. You stop there, letting the words settle between you. She resumes her stitching, the needle flashing in the muted light. After a few moments, she asks what kind of street his shop is, on a question that can mean many things: noise, neighbors, safety. You tell her it is near the market but not in the thick of it, close enough for trade, far enough for quiet in the evenings. The conversation drifts to the coming feast day. You mention that the square will be busy, that there will be musicians and stalls of candied nuts, and that the lime trees will be in their first pale leaf. You say you plan to be there on an errand and might see her if she and her aunt walk that way. You do not press the point. You leave it in the air like the scent of rosemary. She asks if there will be a ribbon market at the feast, and you tell her there almost always is. She nods once, as though filing that away. Then she sets her embroidery aside and pours you a small cup of beer from a jug on the windowsill. It is cool, with a faint sweetness, the sort of beer brewed for morning drinking. She offers you a biscuit flavored with anise, the seeds giving a gentle sharpness. You keep the talk easy, turning it towards small domestic matters. The difficulty of finding good flax this year, the way damp weather affects the rise of bread, the scarcity of saffron. She speaks a little more now, her voice low but even. She tells you the color she most likes to embroider, a green touched with blue, and you think of the ribbon seller's stall in the market. When you finish the beer, you set the cup down so that it rests exactly over the faint ring it left on the table, avoiding a second mark. She notices, small courtesies are never wasted here. Before you leave, you take from your chest a slip of paper with only the date and hour of the feast, tied with a thread the color of unbleached linen. You set it on the table, not between you, but just within her reach. You say that the day will be favorable for meeting old friends and perhaps making new ones. She does not touch the slip, but she glances at it once, and that is enough for now. A quirky tidbit. In some towns, young women would wear a sprig of rue tucked into their kerchief during public gatherings, said to ward off unwanted attention, though in practice it often served as a signal to trusted eyes that she was under the protection of kin. You do not mention this aloud, but you notice that a small bunch of dried rue hangs from the frame above the door. You thank her for the beer and the biscuit, stand, and adjust the strap of your chest. She rises only enough to incline her head, the corners of her mouth almost, but not quite, lifting. You step back into the hall, where the servant waits to let you out. Outside, the clouds have thinned, and a pale sunlight falls across the street. The sound of the river is nearer here, a low, constant murmur behind the clatter of cartwheels. You turn toward the slope that will carry you back into the busier lanes, the slip of paper still resting in her sewing room, its thread unbroken, its meaning left to ripen. The street narrows as you leave the merchant's quarter, its cobblestones shaded by overhanging eaves. Here, you slow your pace. The next stop is one you had not planned for this morning, a household you know to be quietly influential, though not by wealth alone. It belongs to a woman who is not directly kin to any of your current clients, but whose opinion travels quickly through the network of families you depend upon. Today, you need her to think well of a certain young man. Her door is plain, the wood scrubbed to a pale smoothness. Above it hangs a bunch of dried marjoram, the scent faint but still sharp. You knock softly, twice, and after a short wait she opens it herself. She is tall, with a face like well-stitched linen, no fraying, no loose threads. She invites you in with a brief nod and leads you into her front room. The room is small but neat, the light falling in a square across the table from a window cut deeper than most. A brass candlestick stands in the center, polished so well it catches the faintest glow from outside. On the wall, a wooden rack holds 3 clay jugs, each painted with a different simple flower. The stove is unlit. The air here is cool, but not unwelcoming. She offers you a chair and then disappears briefly, returning with a small earthen cup of thin broth. The steam carries the smell of parsley and celery root, and you wrap your hands around it to warm them. You thank her and take a careful sip before beginning. You speak of the young clothmaker's son not in the language of negotiation, but in the way one might speak of a neighbor's steady work. You mention his fair dealings in the market, his willingness to mend small disputes without dragging them into the open, his care for the quality of his goods. You say nothing of marriage directly. You let the conversation rest in the comfortable shape of mutual acquaintances. A mainstream fact. In towns like Krakow, reputations were often reinforced through indirect praise shared with respected members of the community, so that such words might find their way to the right ears. She listens with her head slightly tilted, her eyes steady on you. Now and then, she asks a question how many apprentices he keeps, whether he attends the parish regularly, if he travels for trade, or sends others in his place. You answer plainly, with no excess detail. Too much embroidery can make even true cloth look false. At one point, she sets down her cup and remarks on his mother's way of keeping house. You confirm that it is orderly without being stiff, that guests are made welcome without being overfed or ignored. She seems satisfied with this, though she says nothing more on the subject. When the talk pauses, you offer a small story, how you once saw the young man in the market, paying for a basket of apples while speaking to the seller's youngest child, who was tugging at his sleeve. You describe how he crouched to the child's height, listened, and answered without impatience. It is a detail that costs nothing but often buys much in these conversations. She smiles faintly at that, the lines around her eyes deepening. Then she changes the subject, asking if you have heard the rumor about the miller's daughter in the northern quarter. You have, but you let her tell it in her own words about a betrothal that dissolved when the promised dowry turned out to be less than expected. Historians still argue whether such stories travel faster, because they are cautionary tales, or because they are the kind of gossip that gives people something to weigh their own fortunes against. Either way, you listen, because every telling reveals something about the teller. When her story is finished, you steer the talk toward the coming feast. You say you expect to see her there, and she nods. You mention that there will be fine cloth on display, perhaps even a shipment from Gdańsk. She says she will look for it. You add that there will be music near the lime trees, the sort that makes even the most reserved smile a little. She glances toward the window, where the light has shifted slightly, then back at you. Perhaps, she says, I will take a turn there myself. It is as much as you will get today, and enough. You set your cup down, thank her for the broth, and rise. She walks you to the door, and when you step out, she stands for a moment in the doorway, as if making sure you have set off in the right direction. The street outside is quieter now, the noise of the market softened by the distance. You adjust the strap of your chest and turn toward the lane that will take you past the weaver's row. The day is moving on, and so are you. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you walk. In some quarters, a matchmaker's visit was thought to be more auspicious if she passed through at a time when the sun's shadow lay on the left side of the street. Whether it is true or not, you find yourself drifting toward the shaded side without thinking. The smell of fresh dyed wool meets you before you reach the weaver's row. You breathe it in, feeling the day's threads, literal and figurative, pulling together in your mind. Another conversation waits ahead. Another cup. Another set of careful words to set loose into the city. The weaver's row stretches ahead in a patchwork of color and sound bolts of cloth leaning against doorframes. The dull thud of looms from upper rooms. The sharp scent of fresh dye spilling from open shutters. You slow your steps, partly to avoid jostling the apprentices carrying bundles, partly because the next visit will not be rushed. At the far end of the row, a courtyard opens between two workshops. Its cobblestones are uneven, worn smooth in places where water from dye vats has run for years. The shade here is cool, broken by patches of sunlight falling through the high wooden beams above. You find a place to sit on a low bench, waiting for the person you've come to see, a dyer's wife who hears more in a day than most people in a week. She appears from the back of the workshop, her apron marked with faint rings of blue and red, her hair tucked under a kerchief that has seen better years. She greets you warmly and offers a wooden cup of thin broth, onions, parsley, and a trace of something sour, perhaps from cabbage leaves steeped earlier in the day. You sip and thank her, and she sits opposite, her hands folded in her lap. Your talk begins with the state of the dye trade, the high price of indigo, the unreliability of certain suppliers from the south, the difficulty of keeping apprentices who know how to stir a vat properly. She shakes her head at each complaint, though you can see the pride she takes in her own workshop's steadiness. When the talk drifts, you steer it toward the families you have visited today. You do not name them outright, but you sketch them in enough detail that she begins to connect the lines. She offers small nods when she recognizes someone, frowns when a less reputable name crosses her mind. You note these reactions as carefully as if you were tallying coins. A mainstream fact: dyeing was a respected but demanding craft in 16th century Poland. With its own guild regulations and close ties to the clothmaker's trade, news and gossip from the dyers often overlapped with that of the weavers, giving them a broad view of local affairs. The dyer's wife leans closer then, her voice lowering to a level meant for your ears alone. She tells you of a rumor that the clothmaker's family may have kin in a distant town who once quarreled with the merchant's kin over a shipment of wool. She says it is old business, probably forgotten, but worth knowing. You listen without reacting, tucking the knowledge away for careful handling later. You change the subject lightly, asking after her children. She brightens, telling you of her eldest daughter's skill with the spindle, her youngest son's habit of falling asleep under the table when the day's work is too long. She speaks with a kind of fondness that puts people at ease. It is one of the reasons you trust her counsel. When she pauses, you mention the coming saint's feast and how the square will be busy with stalls and musicians. She says she will be there to buy ribbons for her daughters and perhaps to look at the fine cloth if the traders from Gdańsk arrive in time. She adds, almost idly, that such a place is good for seeing who walks with whom and who pretends not to notice. Historians still argue whether matchmakers gathered deliberate intelligence in public spaces or whether they simply made use of what fell into their laps. You know, the truth is that the line between the two is thin. The dyer's wife offers you another cup of broth, and you accept, partly for the warmth, partly to give her time to decide if there is more she wishes to say. After a few moments, she leans back and remarks that she has never heard a crossword about the young clothmaker's manners. She says this as if it were a simple truth, but you hear the weight behind it. A quirky tidbit comes to mind, and you share it. Some people say that if a dyer's hands are stained evenly, it means she works honestly. If the stains are blotchy, she may be careless. The dyer's wife laughs, holding up her palms to show a deep, even blue. When the cups are empty, you set yours on the bench and thank her for her time. She walks with you to the edge of the courtyard, where the sunlight falls warm on the stones. She says she will watch for the families you mentioned at the feast, just out of curiosity, and you know the eyes of her household will be as sharp as any you could hope for. You step back into the weaver's row, adjusting the strap of your chest. The looms thud in steady rhythm, the sound like a heartbeat for this part of the city. The smell of dye clings to your shawl, sharp and almost metallic. You do not mind. It is the smell of information well gathered. As you make your way toward the next turn, you pass a group of apprentices carrying a length of newly dyed cloth between them, the blue so rich it almost glows in the shaded street. You think of the green ribbon in the market stall, and the blue thread in the merchant's daughter's embroidery, and how colors, like people, find ways to meet if given the right place and time. You step out of the lane and into the broad square where the city's pulse quickens. Vendors call to passers-by, carts creak under their loads, and the smells of roasting chestnuts and spiced honey mingle in the air. The lime trees near the fountain have begun to leaf, their pale green catching the afternoon sun like a quiet celebration. You take a moment to breathe in the bustle, letting the energy settle around you without rushing. Your destination is a small stall near the fountain, where a young woman you've seen before arranges ribbons of every shade and texture. Her fingers move swiftly, tying bows and smoothing silk until the colors seem to catch the light themselves. She looks up as you approach, her eyes bright but cautious. You greet her by name and ask about the day's trade. She smiles faintly, saying business is steady, though some customers wait until the feast to make their purchases. You watch her tie a length of pale green ribbon, the color that seems to thread through your thoughts today. She holds it up for you to see, smooth, soft, with a slight sheen, and you nod your approval. This ribbon will serve well for the merchant's daughter, you think. While she bundles more ribbon, you ask after the upcoming feast. She tells you of the planned stalls, the musicians who will play near the lime trees, and the food vendors who expect to sell roasted nuts, sweet cakes, and spiced wine. You listen, picturing the scene you've described so many times in your mind. A breeze stirs the ribbons on the stall, lifting a few strands to dance briefly in the air. You reach out and tuck a small length into your chest beside the dried rue and marigold, a reminder of the day's weaving, the small pieces that bind the whole. Nearby, children chase each other around the fountain, their laughter rising above the market's hum. You watch their easy joy for a moment, remembering that beneath every careful arrangement lies the hope of happiness. You thank the ribbon seller, her hands already moving toward another length of blue. You adjust your shawl and turn toward the path that leads to the churchyard, where the saints' feast will soon gather the city's families. The hour draws closer, and with it, the moment when all your careful threads may begin to pull together. A quirky tidbit: some ribbons were said to carry small charms when tied. Just so, a knot here for patience, a loop there for favor. Though whether anyone truly believed, this is another matter altogether. As you walk, the sun dips lower, casting long shadows that stretch across the stones like quiet promises. You carry your chest close, your steps steady, and the soft weight of the day's work settled deep within you. Continue. The festival lingers in the air like a fading melody as you make your way away from the square and into the quieter streets. The soft chatter of families walking home, the occasional clink of a merchant packing up for the evening, and the gentle creak of shutters closing all mingle into a gentle lullaby for the city at dusk. The lime trees cast long, weaving shadows across the cobblestones, and the scent of blooming flowers blends with the faint residue of spiced wine and roasted nuts. Your steps take you past familiar doorways, each holding the promise of a story: the clothmaker's neat home, the merchant's sturdy brick house, the noble cousin's blue-shuttered windows. In each, you know the threads of today's meetings will be pulled, examined, and tied carefully to others, forming the beginnings of unions, alliances, and the ever-turning wheel of community. As you walk, the chill of evening settles deeper, and you pull your shawl tighter. The air carries a whisper of wood smoke from hearths lighting across the city, mingling with the scent of fresh bread cooling on windowsills. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, a soft, distant sound that fades quickly into the night. You pause at a small fountain, its basin catching the silver of the rising moon. The water murmurs quietly, a steady, soothing presence. You dip your fingers into the cool flow and let the sensation ground you, a reminder that even amidst the complexities of human lives and plans, some things remain constant and simple. Tonight, you will write letters by candlelight, sealing them with your sprig of rue and your careful hand. These letters will carry hopes, cautions, and quiet truths to families who must decide in time whether the matches you have set forth will bloom or wither. There is no grand triumph in your work, no sudden flourish or dramatic reveal. Instead, there is patience, listening, and the gentle weaving of futures, one careful stitch at a time. And as you prepare for the night, the city around you slows to a whisper, cradling its secrets and dreams beneath the quiet sky. The candle flickers softly as you settle at your writing desk, the room warmed by a small fire whose embers glow a steady red. The scent of beeswax and old paper fills the air, mingling with the faint aroma of dried herbs hung nearby. You unwrap your quill carefully, testing its tip against a scrap of parchment before dipping it into the inkwell. Your hand moves slowly, deliberately, forming each letter with care. The letters you write tonight will carry more than words. They bear the hopes and hesitations of families who trust you to be both honest and gentle. You begin with the merchant's household, composing a letter that balances praise with prudence. Speaking of a young man whose steadiness matches their daughter's quiet strength. You pause often, choosing your words as if they were stitches in a fine garment. The letter must not press too hard, nor be so light as to suggest indifference. It must invite curiosity, leaving space for questions without closing doors. You seal the letter with your familiar sprig of rue pressed beneath the wax, a mark both of authenticity and discretion. Next, you turn to the clothmaker's family. The letter you write here is warmer, acknowledging the family's pride in their son's skill and his steady nature. You mention the possibility of an introduction at the upcoming feast, tying it to the astrologer's advice you sought earlier, the alignment of stars offering a favorable moment. The process is slow, the ink drying steadily under your careful gaze. Outside, the night deepens, and the city sleeps beneath a sky heavy with stars. You write a third letter for the noble cousin's household, more formal in tone but no less thoughtful. You speak of a young woman whose grace and practicality would suit the demands of both town and country living. Between letters, you glance toward the small window where the moon casts silver light on the rooftops. You think of the people who will read these words, who will carry the news into their homes, and who will speak of you in whispers or with quiet gratitude. Your role is one of many threads in the tapestry of their lives, sometimes visible, often unseen. As you finish the last letter, you fold it carefully, place it into a small pouch, and seal it with wax. Tomorrow, these letters will be carried by trusted hands to their recipients, and the work you have begun will move quietly forward. A quirky tidbit: some matchmakers kept small samples of wax from their seals in a box, believing that the shape and color of the wax could influence the recipient's mood, a superstition you indulge in privately. You blow out the candle, letting the smoke curl upward as you prepare to rest. The night is still, and in its calm you find the satisfaction of a day well shaped, even if the final pattern remains unseen. The morning greets you quietly, with pale light filtering through your shuttered window and the soft murmur of the city stirring beyond. You stretch slowly, savoring the rare stillness before the day's demands settle around you like a familiar cloak. Outside, the scent of fresh bread mingles with the cool dampness of dew on cobblestones, a gentle promise of new beginnings. You rise and make your way to the small washstand, the cold water biting at your skin and waking your senses. The morning ritual, simple, unchanging, grounds you before the work begins anew. You wrap your shawl tight and check your chest of tools, feeling the reassuring weight of parchment, quill, and sealing wax nestled within. Today, your tasks will take you to follow up on the letters sent yesterday, to gauge the quiet shifts of opinion, and to gather more threads of information that may guide the next steps. The city feels different this morning, the buzz softer, the faces less hurried, as if everyone is holding their breath for the moments yet to come. You start with a visit to the merchant's household, where you find the daughter seated near the stove, her hands busy with embroidery, and her eyes alert but cautious. Your greeting is soft, your words chosen to convey gentle encouragement rather than pressure. You speak of the feast day, the music, and the possibility of a new friendship blossoming in the warm light of spring. She listens, her fingers stilling for a moment, then resumes her stitching with a slight smile. Small, but enough to hold on to. You leave her with a slip of ribbon in the shade of pale green, a quiet token to remind her of the day's hopes and the patient waiting that will follow. Your steps carry you next to the clothmaker's family, where you find the mother bustling about the kitchen, and the young man taking a rare moment of rest. Your conversation is light but earnest, touching on the steady rhythm of trade, the careful keeping of accounts, and the strength found in quiet reliability. You offer a word of reassurance about the timing, the stars, and the way good things unfold slowly when given room. The mother nods thoughtfully, her eyes reflecting the kind of guarded hope that only comes with experience. You share a smile before departing, leaving behind a sprig of rue tucked into a folded note, a small charm for steadiness and peace. The noble cousin's household is quieter still. You find the lady of the house arranging herbs by the window, her hands steady despite the weight she carries. Your words here are measured, respectful of the role she balances between town and country. You speak of compatibility, of grace under pressure, and of the gifts that come from understanding both worlds. She listens without interruption, then offers a small nod of thanks. You leave her with a folded paper tied with blue ribbon, a symbol of trust and the possibility of harmony. Throughout the day, you move between these households and others, listening more than speaking, watching the small signs, a softened glance, a quickened breath, a tightened grip. You gather the subtle currents that will carry your work forward, knowing that the true art of matchmaking lies in patience as much as in promise. Historians still debate whether such careful pacing was common among matchmakers of your time, or if it was a trait unique to those who valued discretion over haste. You have come to believe that in matters of the heart, no one rushes wisely. As dusk falls once again, you return to your lodging with the weight of the day settled gently on your shoulders. The city quiets, and you prepare to rest, knowing that tomorrow will bring more threads to weave into the delicate fabric you have begun. You wake once more with the dawn, the light a soft promise rather than a demand. The room is still cool, the embers in the hearth long since faded, but the air feels charged with possibility. Outside, the first birds begin their songs, tentative yet insistent, stirring the city from its brief repose. Rising carefully, you dress in your usual attire, the wool tunic and linen shift that have become almost a second skin. Your hands move with the quiet familiarity of routine lacing shoes, wrapping shawl, gathering your chest of tools. Each small movement anchors you, preparing you for the day's delicate negotiations. Your first visit is to the parish priest's house, a modest stone building shaded by a ginkgo tree, whose leaves flutter like whispered prayers. The priest himself greets you at the door, his face marked by years of contemplation and kindness. He listens patiently as you explain the families you serve and the matches you seek to foster. You ask gently whether there are any impediments recorded against the young clothmaker or the merchant's daughter, canonical concerns, past unions, or unresolved vows. He nods thoughtfully, opening a heavy ledger with worn pages that smell of dust and candle smoke. Together, you review the entries, his finger tracing lines of ink as you watch. The ledger confirms what you suspected. No obstacles remain. No spiritual chains bind the hearts you hope to join. You thank the priest quietly, knowing that his blessing, even unspoken, carries weight beyond the pages. A mainstream fact. After the Council of Trent, the Catholic Church insisted on strict record-keeping of marriages and banns to prevent clandestine unions and ensure the sanctity of the sacrament. Leaving the rectory, you pause to watch a small group of children playing near the churchyard wall. Their laughter rises in the morning air, a reminder that life continues in cycles of hope and renewal. You tuck a sprig of fresh basil, given to you by the priest, into your chest, a symbol of protection and goodwill. Next, you make your way to the riverside market, where vendors set up their stalls with bright cloths and woven baskets. Here, you buy small gifts, a ribbon dyed deep red, a box of sweetmeats wrapped in scented paper, and a finely carved comb of horn. These will serve as tokens to ease tense conversations and soften wary hearts. Throughout the day, you deliver the gifts carefully, offering them not as bribes but as signs of respect and intention. You watch faces change subtly, shoulders relax, and words soften. The dance of matchmaking is as much about gestures as it is about promises, and you move through it with practiced grace. As evening falls, You reflect on the threads you have woven today, some taut with hope, others frayed but not broken. You know that each connection is fragile, yet resilient, like the green shoots pushing through spring soil. A quirky tidbit lingers in your thoughts. Some families believe that giving a comb as a gift before marriage symbolizes a hope for harmony and order in the household. Whether true or not, you have seen such tokens bring smiles where words fail. You return home beneath a sky thick with stars, your steps slow and steady. The city sleeps, but your work continues in quiet moments and whispered prayers. The dawn light creeps softly through your window as you prepare for the day ahead. The city stirs gradually, sounds of carts over cobblestones, the faint calls of street vendors, and the rustle of linen drying on lines. You dress in your usual muted colors, the wool tunic and linen shift, familiar and comforting, wrapping you in a quiet confidence. Today you plan to visit the bustling market again, this time with a purpose that goes beyond gathering gossip or choosing ribbons. You carry a small pouch of coins, not lavish but enough to offer modest gifts, ribbons, sweets, combs that smooth over uneasy conversations, and open doors that might otherwise stay closed. Your first stop is a humble stall where a young woman sells sweetmeats and spiced cakes. The scent of honey and cinnamon fills the air. You select a small bundle wrapped in waxed paper and tuck it carefully into your chest. Such treats, are often the best introductions to a wary family. As you move through the market, you observe the familiar rhythms, the barter of merchants, the laughter of children, the keen eyes of buyers scanning wares. You nod to faces, exchanging brief greetings that are less about words and more about presence. You approach the basket, maker's stall next, choosing a finely woven basket lined with linen. It is meant as a gift for the merchant's daughter, a symbol of care and practicality. You watch the basket, maker's hands as she wraps it carefully, the folds precise and deliberate. Nearby, a woman selling herbs smiles at you knowingly and offers a small bundle of sage, said to bring clarity and protection. You accept, adding it to your growing collection of tokens. Gifts like these speak silently of respect and intention, easing the way when words might falter. Later, you deliver the basket and sweets to the merchant's household, careful to present them with the proper words and gestures. The daughter accepts with a hesitant smile, her fingers tracing the basket's weave. The gift is more than a gesture. It is a thread in the fabric of trust you weave with each visit. The day carries on in this pattern, small offerings, quiet conversations, the steady gathering of information and goodwill. Each encounter adds to the delicate tapestry of connections that underlie your work. A quirky tidbit. Some matchmakers carry a small collection of such gifts precisely to signal their sincerity and goodwill, turning everyday objects into tokens of hope. As evening falls, you reflect on the day's progress, the subtle shifts and soft openings. The city quiets around you, and you prepare for the rest that will ready you to continue weaving these lives together tomorrow. The morning air carries a chill as you set out once more, the city still wrapped in the quiet hush of early hours. Your steps take you back to the merchant's neighborhood, where the streets are narrower and the shadows linger longer. The day ahead holds a delicate task, managing the expectations that have begun to stir on all sides. You arrive at the merchant's home just as the first light spills across the tiled stove, warming the parlor where you are welcomed once again. The mistress of the house greets you with measured warmth, her eyes reflecting the careful balance she maintains between hope and caution. You settle near the fire, letting the warmth seep into your fingers. The conversation opens gently, touching first on the weather and the market's latest offerings. Then you turn, slowly and with care, to the matters of introductions and the family's hopes. You remind her that a lukewarm reception does not spell refusal, that patience often turns hesitant beginnings into lasting bonds. She nods, her fingers tightening around the cup she holds. You speak of the young man's steadiness and reliability, weaving praise into gentle assurances. You mention that the feast day meeting will offer a chance for eyes to meet and for words to flow without the weight of formal expectation. A mainstream fact. In 16th century Poland, social occasions like feast days provided essential opportunities for families to observe potential matches in a relaxed setting, allowing for informal interaction. The mistress sighs softly, admitting that her daughter is not quick to warm, a phrase you have heard often in such conversations. You agree that a reserved nature need not be a barrier, and you share a quiet story of a couple you once helped who found harmony in patience rather than haste. You speak then of the gifts you have delivered, the basket, the sweets and the small tokens that mark your good intentions. She thanks you, her expression softening, though the lines of worry remain. Your words turn to the rhythm of waiting, the gentle unfolding of days and meetings yet to come. You remind her that expectations must be balanced with reality, and that not every day will bring clarity, but every day offers a chance to move closer. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you speak. Some families believe that wearing a sprig of rue during meetings can ease the nerves and protect against ill will. You smile softly and mention that you have seen such charms tucked into kerchiefs and cuffs, lending a quiet strength when words might fail. As your visit draws to a close, you stand and gather your things, feeling the familiar weight of your chest and the steady rhythm of the day's work in your bones. The mistress walks you to the door, her step slower now, and you step back into the street, the city unfolding before you with all its quiet complexities. The afternoon sun has shifted toward the west as you make your way through the winding lanes toward the clothmaker's home. The shadows grow longer, stretching across the cobblestones like fingers reaching for the day's end. Your feet move steadily, the familiar weight of your chest a comforting presence at your side. You pause briefly near a well where women are gathered, their voices low but animated as they exchange news and gossip. You listen without speaking, catching fragments about a recent quarrel between neighbors and a wedding that ended quietly last month. These small stories are the undercurrent of your work, shaping the delicate dance of alliances and misunderstandings. At the clothmaker's doorstep, you are greeted with a cautious smile from the mother, who welcomes you into the warm kitchen where the scent of baking bread lingers. The young man sits nearby, his hands resting on the table, eyes alert but patient. You speak gently of the letters sent and the thoughts shared, reminding them that good matches often grow from careful tending rather than sudden bloom. You listen as the mother expresses concerns about the merchant's family, mentioning the rumor you had heard days before the old dispute whispered between kin. You acknowledge the worry but suggest that time and openness can mend many fences, and that your role is to help guide the conversation toward understanding. The young man nods in agreement, his gaze steady. The mother offers you a cup of warm broth flavored with herbs from her garden. You accept gratefully, letting the warmth soothe your travel-weary hands. As the visit draws to a close, you leave behind a small bundle of lavender, tied with a pale ribbon, a symbol of calm and harmony. You watch as the mother tucks it carefully into a cupboard, a quiet gesture that speaks volumes. Outside, the evening air cools, carrying the distant toll of church bells marking the hour. You pull your shawl tighter and set off toward your next appointment, the city unfolding in soft twilight around you. A quirky tidbit. Some matchmakers believed that lavender carried the scent of good fortune, and placing it in a household was thought to invite peace and understanding. Historians still debate whether such small tokens were widespread practices or personal traditions, but you have learned that every kindness leaves its mark. You step lightly through the fading light of early evening, the city's hum softening into a gentle murmur as families settle into their homes. Your path leads you now to a quieter neighborhood, where narrow streets wind between timber-framed houses, their windows glowing warmly against the dusk. The air carries a faint scent of wood smoke and baked apples, comforting and familiar. At the doorstep of a modest house, you pause to smooth your shawl and steady your breath. Inside waits a young woman who has been quietly spoken of, shy, thoughtful, and not yet fully accustomed to the weight of family expectations. You knock gently, the sound a soft tap against the worn wood. The door opens to reveal her mother, who greets you with a nod and steps aside. You enter to find the young woman seated by a small window, her hands folded in her lap, and her gaze steady but cautious. The room is simple but tidy, with a small clay stove in one corner and a few embroidered cloths hanging on the walls. You offer your greetings in a soft voice, speaking first of the day's weather and the quiet promise of the coming week. You notice how the young woman's eyes flickered to the door, as if measuring your presence and weighing the space between politeness and expectation. Your conversation begins with gentle questions about her favorite tasks, the rhythm of her daily prayers, the songs she sings quietly when no one is listening. She answers slowly but with care, revealing a steady spirit beneath her reserve. A mainstream fact: many young women of the period found comfort and expression in daily prayers and household tasks, which formed the foundation of their social and spiritual lives. You speak then of patience and the slow unfolding of relationships, of the ways that understanding can grow in the spaces between hurried words. You mention the feast day gathering, inviting her to see it as a place not just of noise and crowd, but of possibility and gentle discovery. Her mother listens closely, offering a few quiet words of encouragement, while the young woman's gaze softens just enough to hint at a small, hopeful smile. You leave her with a sprig of rosemary, tied with a slender ribbon, a token of remembrance and resilience. As you step back into the street, the sky deepens into a richer shade of blue, and the first stars begin to twinkle overhead. The city's lights glow faintly in windows, and the distant sound of a lute drifts through the air. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Rosemary was often believed to sharpen memory and ward off sadness, making it a fitting gift for those embarking on new chapters. You tuck the image of the young woman's steady hands and quiet smile into your thoughts as you continue on, the night welcoming you with its calm embrace. The streets grow quieter as night deepens, lanterns casting pools of warm light onto the uneven cobblestones. Your steps echo softly as you make your way toward the home of a respected elder, a woman whose influence stretches through the neighborhoods like the roots of an ancient tree. Her counsel is sought in matters both domestic and communal, and her approval carries weight that few can claim. You find her seated near a small fire, the flickering flames illuminating lines of experience etched into her face. She greets you with a nod that speaks of long acquaintance and mutual understanding. The room smells faintly of dried herbs and beeswax, the air thick with the quiet dignity of a household well kept. Your talk begins with the small matters: the city's changing seasons, the quality of this year's rye harvest, the ebb and flow of market prices. Then, with the subtlety of a seasoned mediator, you bring the subject to the families whose futures you shepherd. You speak of the young clothmaker's steadiness, the merchant's daughter's quiet resolve, and the noble cousin's adaptable grace. She listens intently, offering insights drawn from years of observing human nature and the intricate dance of alliances. When she speaks, her words are measured, weighted with wisdom rather than haste. She emphasizes the importance of balance between hope and realism, between family desires and individual hearts. You share with her the tokens you have gathered, the sprigs of rue and rosemary, the ribbons dyed in soft hues, explaining their place not only as gifts but as symbols of goodwill and protection. She nods approvingly, recounting how such symbols have long been woven into the fabric of courtship and marriage. A mainstream fact: symbolic gifts and charms were common in 16th century Poland, serving both practical and superstitious roles in the social rituals of marriage. As the fire flickers low, she offers a quiet blessing for your work, expressing hope that patience and kindness will guide the days ahead. You feel the warmth of her words settle deep within, a balm for the weariness that sometimes shadows your steps. A quirky tidbit surfaces. She recalls a tradition where a family might hide a small coin in a bride's shoe, believed to bring prosperity and ward off misfortune. You smile, knowing such customs, whether true or fanciful, add color and comfort to the journey you help others navigate. Rising, you thank her for her time and wisdom, stepping back into the night with renewed resolve. The city sleeps around you, but your work continues quietly in the spaces between dreams and dawns. The morning is pale and quiet as you make your way toward the village churchyard, where the coming saints' feast will soon draw families from across the city. The air is crisp with the scent of blooming hawthorn and freshly turned earth, a subtle reminder of the seasons turning in their steady cycle. You carry your chest lightly, feeling the familiar weight of your tools and tokens nestled inside. The churchyard is beginning to fill with early arrivals, women in modest gowns carrying baskets of food, men in worn coats speaking softly beneath their breath, children trailing behind with eyes wide at the sight of the gathering. The lime trees overhead filter the sunlight into patches of shade and gold, their leaves whispering in the gentle breeze. You find a spot near the stone fountain, its water clear and steady, a quiet heart in the bustling space. From here, you watch as families greet one another with nods and embraces, their conversations blending into a soft murmur. The smell of fresh bread and spiced cakes drifts from nearby stalls, mingling with the faint scent of herbs and polished wood. Your eyes search the crowd for familiar faces: the merchant's daughter, the clothmaker's son, the noble cousin, each one a thread in the tapestry you have been weaving with care. You see the young woman with the embroidery basket, the man with the steady gaze, the lady with the blue shutters in her eyes. The musicians begin to play a dulcimer's gentle twang, the soft drone of a pipe, the rhythmic tapping of a tambourine. The notes weave through the air, inviting movement, easing tension, and stirring hope. You notice how some couples step closer, how hands brush almost by accident, how laughter breaks free like birds taking flight. A small child runs past, clutching a ribbon tied in pale green, the color you chose days before. It flutters in the breeze like a whispered promise. You feel the familiar tug of satisfaction mixed with cautious hope. Your work today has carried these families to this moment, but the story is still unfolding, a delicate dance of glances, words, and choices yet to be made. You reach into your chest and pull out a sprig of rue, pressing it gently into your palm. You breathe in its sharp scent and let it remind you of the patience and care your trade demands. The future, like the feast, is bright with possibility but needs steady hands to guide it safely. As the sun climbs higher, you rise and step into the flow of the crowd, your heart steady and your mind alert. Today is but one step on a long path, but it is a step taken with intention, grace, and quiet resolve. You settle on a low stone wall near the edge of the feast, where the bustle softens into a gentle hum. The sun filters through the lime leaves, casting flickering shadows that dance lightly across the cobblestones. The scent of honeyed cakes and fresh herbs mingles with the crisp air, grounding you in the moment. Around you, families and neighbors move with cautious ease, their eyes bright with curiosity and the delicate hope of new beginnings. You watch the young merchant's daughter as she converses quietly with the clothmaker's son, their smile shy but genuine. Nearby, the noble cousin stands slightly apart, observing, weighing, his expression thoughtful. You notice the small details: a hand brushing a stray lock of hair behind an ear, the gentle incline of a head toward a whispered word, the way a ribbon trembles slightly in the breeze. These subtle signs, more than any spoken promise, carry the weight of possibility. Your eyes meet briefly with the young woman you met days before, the one with the quiet smile and steady hands. She holds a sprig of rosemary tucked into her kerchief, a small charm for memory and resilience. You nod softly, acknowledging the shared understanding of patience's power. A juggler passes nearby, tossing bright balls into the air with practiced ease. His rhythm matches the pulse of the gathering, steady, deliberate, hopeful. You feel the familiar pull of the dance you orchestrate, a weave of lives and hopes stretching before you like a finely spun thread. Historians still debate how much influence matchmakers held in moments like this, whether they guided each step or simply watched as the story unfolded on its own. You know the truth lies somewhere in between. Your role is both architect and witness, careful and unobtrusive. As the afternoon deepens, you gather your chest and stand, feeling the day's work settling softly into place. The feast continues around you, full of laughter, music, and the quiet stirrings of futures yet to be written. You step forward as the afternoon light softens, carrying your chest carefully and letting your eyes sweep the gathering with practiced ease. Your role here is subtle but essential: to present final proposals with quiet dignity, ensuring that all parties feel both respected and informed. Near the lime trees, elders gather in small clusters, their faces lined with years of experience and tempered by countless such negotiations. You approach them with a slight bow, hands steady as you unfold a carefully prepared parchment. The script is neat, deliberate, and carries the weight of both promise and propriety. You speak clearly but softly, outlining the terms that have emerged from your conversations: the dowries pledged, the times agreed upon, the mutual hopes expressed. Each point is offered as fact and possibility, allowing room for questions while affirming commitment. The elders nod slowly, exchanging glances and murmurs that indicate the discussions to come. You notice the subtle shifts in posture, the softening of brows, and the lightening of voices, all signs that your words are landing as intended. A young man steps forward, the clothmaker's son, and speaks with measured respect about his intentions and readiness to honor the agreements. Beside him, the merchant's daughter listens attentively, her hands folded in her lap but her eyes bright with cautious hope. You remind the group gently of the church's requirements, the need for banns, for witnesses, and for blessings to formalize what has been arranged in these careful meetings. Your words carry the authority of tradition and the promise of continuity, a mainstream fact. The formal betrothal ceremony in 16th century Poland often took place before witnesses and included the public declaration of intent, marking the transition from private negotiation to communal acknowledgement. A quiet tension gives way to a soft murmur of assent, and you see the relief that comes with shared understanding. Your part in this chapter is nearly complete, but you remain watchful, knowing that even final proposals require tending. A quirky tidbit occurs to you. In some families, the betrothal ring was worn on the right hand to signify a promise made but not yet fulfilled, a subtle symbol understood by those who watched closely. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the square, you fold your parchment and tuck it safely away. The moment is poised between ending and beginning, filled with the delicate balance of hope and duty. You step back, your heart steady, ready to witness the blessings and to carry forward whatever comes next. The air grows still as the betrothal ceremony unfolds beneath the lime trees. The crowd quiets respectfully, faces turn toward the couple and the officiating cleric, whose voice rises gently with the ancient words. The stone paving beneath your feet feels solid and steady, grounding you in this moment of solemn promise. You stand near enough to witness without intrusion, observing the joining of hands, the exchanged vows spoken clearly and without haste. The young man's eyes hold the weight of commitment, steady and sincere. The merchant's daughter's gaze is softer, touched by a mixture of hope and quiet resolve. Around you, family members watch with folded hands or whispered prayers, their faces reflecting a mixture of joy, relief, and the sober recognition of the responsibilities ahead. The parish priest's blessing echoes through the space, mingling with the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird settling for evening. You notice small details, the gentle tightening of a ribbon on the bride's kerchief, the subtle smile of an elder nearby, the way the sunlight catches the glint of a simple gold ring. These are the moments that hold the meaning beneath the ceremony, the threads that bind beyond words. Historians still debate the extent to which such public blessings influence the strength and longevity of marriages in the 16th century. You know that while ritual marks a beginning, the work of marriage unfolds in the quiet days that follow. As the ceremony concludes, you step forward briefly to offer your own quiet congratulations, your voice low and steady. The couple acknowledges you with gratitude, their faces lit by the warm glow of shared promise. You take a moment to breathe in the mingled scents of lime blossoms and worn stone, feeling the day's tension ease into a soft calm. The city around you continues its gentle rhythm, carrying stories old and new beneath the fading light. The path ahead remains long and winding, but for now, this blessing marks a meaningful step, a moment of unity sealed in time and memory. The shadows lengthen as evening draws near, and you find yourself once again weaving through the soft murmurs of the departing crowd. The lime trees sway gently overhead, their leaves whispering a lullaby that mingles with the fading music and distant voices. You carry the quiet satisfaction of having witnessed promises made, but your work is not yet complete. You seek out the families once more, offering gentle reassurances to soften the last flickers of doubt that tend to surface before new beginnings. You speak with a calm tone, reminding them that uncertainty is a natural companion to change and that patience often reveals the best paths forward. A mother confides her worries about the unknown temperament of a future daughter-in-law. You listen and share stories of tempered spirits and the gradual blooming of affection. A father speaks hesitantly of concerns over dowry and status, and you offer perspective drawn from the steady march of past unions where kindness outweighed coin. The young couple you have guided through these days stands nearby, their hands brushing lightly, eyes meeting with a tentative warmth. You see in their faces the fragile hope that makes your role both necessary and humbling. You pass small tokens of encouragement, a sprig of lavender here, a carefully folded note there, symbols that speak of steadiness, resilience, and goodwill. These gestures, quiet and unassuming, often carry more weight than the grandest speeches. A mainstream fact: it was common for matchmakers to act as mediators during moments of hesitation, smoothing tensions and reinforcing bonds through both words and symbolic gifts. As twilight deepens, you walk the familiar paths home, the city's lights beginning to flicker like distant stars. The weight of the day rests gently on your shoulders, a reminder of the delicate balance you maintain between hope and reality. Historians still debate whether such moments of reassurance were standard practice or the mark of a particularly careful matchmaker. You know from experience that they make all the difference. The night welcomes you with quiet promises, and you prepare to rest, ready to begin anew with the coming dawn. The city breathes quietly beneath the soft glow of dawn as you rise once more, the day unfolding slowly, deliberately, like a well-turned page in a familiar book. The streets are still hushed, the cobblestones cool beneath your feet, and the air carries the faint scent of wood smoke and fresh earth. You gather your tools and tokens, each piece a steady companion in the work that has become your life's rhythm. Your chest feels lighter now, having borne the weight of hopes, promises, and the delicate weaving of lives. Your thoughts return to the families you have served, the merchant's daughter with her quiet strength, the clothmaker's son steady in his resolve, the noble cousin balancing worlds of town and country. Each thread has been placed with care, each knot tied with intention. As you walk the familiar paths, the city begins to stir. Shutters open, voices rise, carts rattle over stones, life renewed in the cycle of day and night. You pause beneath the lime trees in the square, where the memories of feast days and whispered promises linger like the scent of blooming blossoms. The gentle rustle of leaves seems to echo the soft, steady pulse of the city's heart. You know that your work is far from done, that many days and meetings lie ahead, many stories yet to be told. But for now, there is peace in the moment, a quiet confidence born of patience, care, and the knowledge that you have set in motion threads that will, in time, bind together. A final sprig of rue, pressed between your fingers, reminds you that every ending is also a beginning, and every promise, a seed waiting to grow. You breathe deeply, feeling the calm settle into your bones as you prepare to rest and wait. We hope this little journey through time has been a pleasant one for you. If you'd like to hear more, please like, share, or leave a kind comment. And make sure to subscribe, so you'll be here for the next unhurried story. From timeless and boring, sweet dreams.